So let's get into the Rugby Championship 2022, the odds on who's going to win it, and also have a look at the rebuilding job that is New Zealand. And I thought you were going to score.
Ask a better question, you get a better answer.
Hi guys, welcome back. Now I got into covering the Rugby Championship last year. I want to carry on this year, especially because of all the exciting test series in July. 2-2 to the north and the south. New Zealand, Australia losing. South Africa, Argentina, tight wins. So I don't think anyone's really in any massive momentum. So all things are up for grabs. Now, the fans of the Rugby Championship nations, you guys are going to have to forgive me. This is a Northern Hemisphere perspective, I guess. So please do educate me. I love reading all your comments, so get them below. But I'm really excited for this tournament this year. Let me know who you think's going to win it. So let's have a look at the draw, the odds. Now, a little disclaimer here. This isn't a betting thing at all. I'm not condoning betting or saying you should do it. I'm just interested in the odds. So that's the context it's in. Now, what's great about this championship is it starts off with the big one. And I don't think it's disrespectful to say South Africa, New Zealand is the big rivalry. And it's in South Africa. 2 games in South Africa. First up, with New Zealand maybe a bit vulnerable. They've changed a lot of things since those July test windows. We'll get into that in a minute. With, the coaches, the forwards and backs coaches being the sacrificial lamb. So they're kind of starting again. South Africa starting to build maybe a little bit of momentum after a decent third test against Wales. So great chance for South Africa and also a great chance for New Zealand to bounce back. And looking at the odds, it's no surprise that last year's winners, New Zealand, are 11-10, South Africa 11-8. They're the 2 big favourites and they face off straight away. So those first 2 games may decide the course of this championship. Let me know what you think. Last year it was New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, and then Argentina on 0 points. And Argentina will desperately want to change that. They're starting 2 games at home against Australia, the third favourites, if you like. So, it's not easy, but it's doable. They could win those games. But of course, if Australia start fast and get 2 away wins, then they've actually got a really good draw, as in they're home then 3 times out of 4 after that. So it was really set up nicely. Now, if you had to push me for who I think might win this, I'd probably go South Africa because of those 2 home games to start with. I think that definitely is very useful if they can start fast, of course. And a slight dark horse, I'd say Australia. I quite like their draw. Of course, they're going away from home to start with twice, but it is against Argentina, the most beatable side, although they'll be very difficult. But if they can win both of those away games, I think they're in with a great chance of taking a kind of a dark horse championship. Let me know what you think. I've created a link to a vote below. I love taking votes on this channel because I love collating your opinions, especially the guys who support these teams. So copy and paste that link. Let me know who you think's going to win. A nice simple vote, and I'll come back with the result in a few days' time. So yeah, I think Australia are maybe not a bad shout, to be honest. Those 2 games against Argentina to start, then both at home to South Africa, and then 1 each home and away to New Zealand. I think it's kind of as good as they could hope for. Against England, I think they showed some tactical variation, which I didn't see under Checker. They can play a very tight forwards game, a kind of Brumbies type game, and they can be more expansive in the backs as well. They've got plenty of running threat, so you do have variation, and I quite like their draw. So yeah, that would be an outside shout for me. But yeah, copy and paste that vote link and let me know what you think. Now, the second really interesting topic I think of this Rugby Championship is, can New Zealand rebuild? And it is a rebuild because they wanted to build through the Island series, but it didn't happen. And they've kicked out their forwards and backs coach. So ouch. Foster remains, maybe a bit lucky, but it's not just tweaking, it is a bit of a reset. And when you have a completely new forwards and backs coach, you're going to have lots of new systems as well. And maybe they'll keep certain things, but, those 2 coaches will want to put their own stamp on it, and they should be allowed to. Foster is lucky, like I said, because he'd, of course, signed off on all the decisions from Plumtree and Moore, so he's a little lucky. It's a bit of a weird setup. We've got Foster there taking the backs temporarily. Joe Schmidt coming in and kind of tinkering with the overall strategy, which is kind of Foster's job, so that's a bit awkward as well. And then Ryan's coming in as the forwards coach. He's certainly done really well with Crusaders, with Fiji. He's got a lot of plaudits, and he probably would have come into the setup at some point, although it was fast-tracked, which would have cost the New Zealand Union quite a lot of money as well. Now, job one for Ryan, quite a big one. He's got to rebuild that New Zealand pack into a fearsome set piece and tight unit. Now, they've done it before, but we didn't see it against Ireland. Now, what was quite interesting for me in the previous year for the All Blacks, I think they actually looked pretty good when they went direct. I remember a game against Wales last year where for the whole first half they tried to soften Wales up with direct plays, lots of pick and goes, very forwards dominated, and then slowly opened out in the second half. And I really like that strategy. But then when they've had their losses, when they've looked poor or vulnerable, they've kind of tried to open up straight away with champagne rugby without any of that forward dominance, plus their skills have let them down. So I think they may well go back to a bit more of a forwards-based game, a bit more power, a bit more kicking, maybe back to basics, and then slowly open out. You know, you're not going to stop New Zealand being a skillful team because we can see in their domestic game there's incredible skills there, but they've got to build from a base. So that is job number one. Job number two is those skills which were really poor against Ireland, who have been poor for the last year. Now, there are players, very skillful players in the New Zealand team, so it's not the players as such, although you may tweak with them, but it's got to be a mindset change, it's got to be a focus change, and like I said, maybe a bit less panic as well, build into the game a bit more slowly, but they want to get those skills back on point. I think that's very doable. I think they could do that fairly quickly. Now, finally, on to selecting a team for South Africa for New Zealand to get them back on track. There's some really tricky calls here, and I'd love to know your selections. I'm not 100% on this, but I'm just thinking this is the best selection in my head. They're taking quite a big squad to South Africa with reserves, but they do have quite a lot of injuries. You go through the list, you've still got Moody out, who would probably come straight back in. Leonard Brown, Goodhue in the centres could definitely come back in at some point. Retallick, of course, is a starter. The physical Blackadder's out. Young Lord, Laulala, a really good prop there. Tuingafati, another prop, is out. So they've kind of pretty much used all the player resource in New Zealand. There's a few players that may come back in. Mackenzie, when he's available, definitely could come back into the frame as well. Yeah, but here's the team I'd probably go with, and it's a change up in that front row. I don't think the front row went well at all against Ireland. So some of it's enforced through injury, but I go Ethan de Groot. He was told to go away and get fitter. I didn't think he was ready for the Ireland tour, so he's got a point to prove. He's gone away and done that. He's very mobile. I think he could be very exciting. Takiaho, I think, gets a start. I think Taylor hasn't looked particularly useful. Coles is getting on a bit, so let's go Takiaho. Ta'avo as well. There's no Laulala. There's no Tuingafasi, so there's a few limited options, but I go for a very new front row there. A bit risky, yes, but I think it's worth a go because the existing front row that played against Ireland didn't do that well, plus injuries. Retallick's out for South Africa, so I think Scott Barrett definitely steps up. Whitelock, Scott Barrett then. At 6, you need someone physical like a Scott Barrett, and I think the closest there is Frizzell. Get him in there, being nasty, being physical. 7's a tricky one. Kane did okay against Ireland, tackled his heart out. Does he have the impact of some other 7s around the world? Maybe not. But Papali'i, the next guy in line, didn't really push his case forwards against Ireland either. So Kane stays for me as captain. Maybe a little fortunate, but I think the evidence keeps him there. Ardi Surveyor, their best forward, stays at 8. He's fantastic. He could move around a bit because on the bench I don't have Papali'i, which is a bit harsh. Maybe I should. But I've got Sotutu for impact, and then Severe could go to 7, something like that as well. So yeah, could play around with that bench, but that's the way I've gone. In the backs, I think Smith stays. He's still their best 9. We want to see that impact of Fakatava off the bench. That could be exciting. Then at 10, it's the old question. Mo'unga, Beauden Barrett. Well, Beauden Barrett had his chance against Ireland. Maybe there was too much on his shoulders, some pundits said. I don't know. But certainly in open team play, they didn't build many chances. They did take advantage of some opportunities sometimes, which they're very good at doing. But let's have Mo'unga in there. For these South Africa tests, both tests, try and build into the game and then have the extra playmakers around him to help out. Havili at 12, let's give him a run. Tapai's had a bit of a run there, so let's give Havili a run. But when the other centres available, like Leonard Brown and Goodhue, maybe they do come back in. But big chance for Havili alongside Ioane. Beauden Barrett drops to 15 to be that extra playmaker, to take a bit of pressure off his shoulders. Jordan on the other wing, even though maybe he's a fullback, but he's so good, he's got to be in the team. Geordie drops to the bench, covering the back 3, can cover all sorts of positions as well. And then Taylor, Bauer, Newell, the front row replacements. Big Tuipulotu, the second row replacement. start with a bit more of a direct game, a bit more physicality with the likes of Frizzell, and then a bit more control and building into the game from Mwanga with some help around him. So let me know what you think of that New Zealand team. Pop your teams below. Do your vote for who you think is going to win the Rugby Championship, and I'll catch you next time.